Unless you've somehow been able to avoid all of our marketing for it, MDM's Shift Conference is coming up on September 11th through the 13th in downtown Denver. And as our marquee annual in-person event, Shift serves as a preeminent opportunity for distribution executives to gather insights, case study examples, and other thought leadership across MDM's core pillars of hybrid sales, digital transformation, data analytics, and people. While we're now under a month away from the event at the time of this recording, there's still time to register and attend, as we'd love to have as many distributors represented there as possible. And as a special promotion, anyone listening to this podcast can use the code MDM Podcast to get 10% off of their Shift registration. I'm Mike Hockett, our executive editor, and in this episode of the MDM Podcast, we're going to provide a preview of what we're looking forward to at Shift and what you can expect. And to help me do so is MDM senior editor, Vesna Brajkovic. Vesna, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me on, Mike, and hi, everyone.
Vesna, this is your first appearance on the MDM podcast, but many of our readers and listeners have seen you on recent MDM webcasts, our virtual sales summit that we held in early July, or perhaps they've met you at an industry event. But even so, can you share a little bit more about your background that led to you joining MDM in the spring of 2023?
Sure, and maybe you've seen me or my byline around MDM, or even read something I've written without even knowing it. But like as Mike said, you haven't really heard my voice on the MDM podcast before, so I'm happy to get to know you this way. So I've been a supply chain industry reporter and editor for the past 7 years, and actually come from the magazine world. So my niche has been transportation and logistics, and having been on the editorial staff for magazines covering things like trucking, railroading, aviation, automotive. So that's kind of my background. So when I'm speaking to distributors or visiting their operations, that's why you'll see kind of my ears perk up every time someone mentions like an in-house fleet, or why my favorite people to talk to are fleet maintenance managers or technicians, because I feel like they really get the behind the scenes operational look, and kind of why I'm always taking pictures of planes or freight chains if you ever see me around. So I've always covered the transportation side of supply chain. So coming to MDM and getting the opportunity to really get in the nitty gritty of the distribution operations and get that really all encompassing inside look. And I always say the asphalt and iron highways, they all kind of lead to distribution centers. So happy to be here and covering this industry.
Yeah, and it's just great for us to have that logistics perspective from you. I mean, we all kind of cover it, but to have someone that's lived and breathed that for most of their journalism career is pretty cool. All right, so Shift. I suppose we should start with a little more context on what this event is. And I mentioned this in the intro a bit, but as a little bit of a background, MDM used to have an in-person conference each fall that we called Sales GPS, which was the brainchild of MDM's Tom Gale and Indian River Consulting Group's Mike Marks. They wanted an event that catered to the modern distribution sales world and the trends and challenges that go along with it, and that's what that event delivered. Sales GPS was held annually for a number of years, most recently in 2021, until we decided to revamp the event during 2022 as a way to provide an event that was more holistic and captured the essence of MDM's editorial pillars. Sales is one of those pillars, but as I noted earlier, Shift allowed us to incorporate the other 3 pillars of digital transformation, data analytics, and people, which we found crucial because there is so much overlap between all of them. So Vesna, last year's Shift was only about 4 months after you started with MDM. So I'm hoping it served as a way for you to fully immerse yourself in not only the in-person version of a lot of the topics that we cover on MDM day to day, but certainly as a great networking opportunity for you to meet and greet and mingle with a lot of the people in this industry that we regularly talk with, along with plenty of new faces. So what were your overall impressions of Shift last year?
Yeah, Shift was, I think, hands down the highlight of my first year in distribution. And not just because we literally pay me to say this, but it was kind of like seeing MDM, and all the coverage we do in person, and hearing it, for yourself. It's just literally 3 days of content and networking with distributors who are engaged and who are looking to advance their business. So everyone there seems really hungry to grow market share, to meet customer demand, to empower a workforce to create a better business. It's really infectious. And I know the team behind the scenes too is very intentional about the kind of ratio type of people that are there. So when you sit down at a table, you always have a peer to speak to, and it's so valuable. And I think that's so important. I think we've all been to conferences where you sit at a table and you're like, where are the distributors?
Yeah,
And I think many people feel that way about me probably, but I like to think of myself as an honorary distributor. And I love to talk to people because we're talking about, culture, data, sales. It's all weaved throughout the agenda, and there's always a connection being made throughout the day.
definitely. And like I said, there's so much overlap between each of those key topics. And just to reiterate your note about how we are very intentional about that distributor attendance ratio. So we do limit the amount of solution provider tickets available for Shift to protect that ratio. And we love solution providers, and we are so appreciative of those that are sponsoring this year's event. But indeed, our mission for Shift, besides the content and the networking value that it provides, is to have as many distributors in the room as possible so that they can learn from each other. And I'm sure when we're prospecting for industry events that we're covering, one of the first things we check is, how many distributors are going to be at this show, and who are we going to be able to talk to there. So that's what one of our main goals for Shift is. So we're going to get into some agenda highlights for this year's event in a bit, but first, Vesna, what would you say your favorite session or part of Shift 2023 was?
I think my favorite session, I always love to hear from Gartner's Maria Bolden. She gives overview of the B2B selling environment, and I always get so much out of her keynotes because I'm a really big data person, and you hear a lot of people talking and telling these stories about sales and, what people are looking for, what's the next step. But I think because she backs it up with so much data, it's so interesting for me. So if you haven't been to Shift, you might have caught her, but she was also at our profitability summit. And so this year, she's actually going to pass the torch over to her colleague, Andy Clement, who has big shoes to fill,
Mhm.
but is such a great speaker. And Gartner's research on sales and unlocking agility to drive sales growth, it's so thorough, it's so data driven, and something you really can't find elsewhere, or I've never found it elsewhere. And I know, so last year, Bolden was explaining basically that most customers don't really require as much face time with sellers as maybe it seems. So the study that they did found that there was really no correlation between the time spent in customer facing activities and sales performance. So instead, she kind of was explaining to the audience that sellers should use their time to help buyers feel validated, to feel confident about the deal. And that's something that only a human can accomplish, not technology, not anything else. So, and it's always so funny to see those moments when everyone like me starts scribbling in their notebook all at once, or you're hearing them type on their keyboard. And I think her presentation is always that moment. And so I don't think it'll be any different this year. I'm really excited to see what they have in store.
Yeah.
So
And
I
yeah,
think it's
I was
go
just going to
ahead.
say, yeah, Andy Clement was on our distribution sales summit as well, like tag team the keynote for that. So we've seen him. He's a great speaker as well. So I think that's going to be, like you said, big shoes to fill for Andy, but I think that transition has been pretty natural for him he's been kind of hip and hip with Maria for the last 6 months or so. So I think he's well versed in leading Maria's example.
Yes, for sure. And I especially that session being kind of our opening keynote sort
Yeah.
of, it's the sales, digital, data, culture, tech, it's all kind of wrapped up in that conversation. So yeah, I'm really excited to see that. And I also, my second favorite part is seeing you kind of in live reporter mode during the fireside chats. I feel like I get to see that a little bit, but maybe not, the audience doesn't always get to see you kind of behind the scenes on stage. So any highlights for this year on who's going to be the fireside chat and what you're looking forward to?
Yeah, really excited for these fireside chats, which, we have these podcast discussions all the time, which are essentially the same format, but it's
Sure.
definitely a different format when you're doing it on stage in front of an audience here. So Yeah, our fireside chats serve as two of the marquee items in our agenda. Last year, I was able to have one on stage with then Global Industrial CEO Barry Litwin, who some may have seen that he just took the same position at Party City. Just a quick news item there. This year, I'll be doing a fireside chat with John Weborg, who is the founder, president, and CEO of Stellar Industrial Supply, which is a very well-known and well-respected distributor that hasn't yet cracked our top 50 list for industrial supplies distributors, but has significantly expanded from its Pacific Northwest base to now serving as a national distributor, and one that is really leveraging digital capabilities. So I'll be having John discuss Stellar's transformative strategies and how it's continuously strengthening its value proposition. So really looking forward to that conversation. And then the next day, Tom Gale will be conducting a fireside with Wesco CEO John Engel, who represents an $18 billion electrical supplies distributor. Hopefully, a lot of our readers saw our three-part article series during July that analyzed Wesco, which culminated in a new MDM case study on Wesco that packages the insights from that report and much more. And that just went live in the MDM store a couple days ago as we're recording this in mid-August. So that fireside with John Engel will tackle Wesco's 5-year transformation that really ramped up in 2020 upon its big acquisition of Annixter International, which essentially doubled the size of Wesco's business. So they'll get into the integration process and what Wesco has done since that big deal to be a digital leader. So between those two, it's going to be really cool to have two very different distributors represented with those firesides. Stellar as what you could call a mid-sized distributor with about $130 million in 2023 sales, and then Wesco as the largest electrical distributor in North America. So a nice just mix of perspectives there. And then Vesna, you previewed Andy Clement's keynote that will lead off our content Friday morning at Shift. I also want to highlight our Thursday keynote, which will be delivered by the McKinsey team of senior partner Kevin Sachs and partner Victoria Bowe. And this will be Sachs' third time keynoting Shift, and the research and analysis that he and the team have provided in the 2 years prior have been top-notch. I actually had Kevin on the podcast a few weeks ago to preview their keynote session for this year. And he said it really looks to focus on customer experience and distributor adaptability. So it'll be a great way to dive into a full day of thought leadership. So Vesna, besides those two keynotes and those two firesides, do you want to touch on any other Shift sessions that you're looking forward to this year?
Sure. There's so many, so I'll kind of narrow it down. But I think the opening day workshop led by, everyone's favorite Tom Gale and then Mike Marks of Indian River Consulting. I think that's a must attend. And I thought that was so valuable for me to observe because it sets up everyone for success throughout the conference. And I think is pretty unique compared to other conferences I attended, where it kind of gives you a chance to really benchmark your progress and with assessment tools to guide discussion and takeaways. So a lot of great discussion there and really beneficial. And then Thursday morning, we have Kevin Reed Morris, who has led research projects for MDM Research, including one on AI. And now we have here to share the common characteristics of high-performing business model innovators. So he's a great speaker. I'm really excited about that one. And we love data over here at MDM. So there will be also sessions on best practices for data analytics, the future of B2B digital experience, and also on change management and how to get sales model transformation right. So really something for everyone throughout the agenda.
That's great. And yeah, just going back to that session opening Wednesday afternoon with Mike Marks and Tom Gale, they always do just such a great job of setting the stage for getting people in the right mindset of what the rest of the conference is going to discuss. And kind of it almost itself serves as a preview for here's the change management levers that we're going to be doing deep dives in the rest of this conference. So yeah, really looking forward to them kicking things off with that orientation kind of session on Wednesday afternoon.
Yeah, and I love their personalities together. I just feel like Tom and they're just two peas in a pod. It's funny.
Well, the amount of detail that these tracks and the rest of the agenda get into it's why we recommend that distributors attend Shift in teams if they can. Sending one person is always great, but from our own experience attending a lot of industry events and from what we've heard from others is that it's far more effective when you have multiple people from your organization at an event like Shift because it helps make that knowledge that you gained at the event really stick. And when you have a colleague that you can bounce ideas off of, like, hey, maybe we should try that tactic that that distributor talked about at Shift or and maybe it's someone that you can rehash those top things that you learned and that resonated with you, those things that compelled you to take a note on paper or a mental note, those things that they stick much better when you have more than just yourself attending and going back to your company and saying, here's what I learned, and hoping that someone else agrees with you. When you have someone else that can corroborate what you learned together, I just feel like that has a much better chance of resulting in change management from what you brought back from the conference. And then, as a final point, one of the biggest reasons, if not the biggest reason, that executives attend industry events is for the networking opportunities. For us at MDM, as Vesna noted, Shift gives us an amazing opportunity to chat with a lot of industry contacts that we're regularly talking with via email and having speak on our webcasts and in virtual summits. But it's just nothing like getting to do that in person. So, did Vesna, any thoughts on just that networking aspect?
Yeah, it's so true, Mike. I just think the most valuable conversations I have at Shift are ones that happen in between the sessions, before or after, and there's also the networking receptions, breakfasts, lunches too. So I know I'll be there. I would love to see you all. And one cool thing I think this year happening on the second night on Thursday, right before the evening reception, we'll have what we call an innovation super session. And that's an hour in which attendees will join a discussion guided by a facilitator, and that'll explore key topics, share insights, generate actionable solutions as it relates to whatever chosen track. So there's hybrid sales, digital, data analytics. So once again, something for everyone. And I think no matter what track you end up in, it will be so valuable.
And each of those networking opportunities that you just covered, I think those almost serve as a way for you to just further absorb everything you just saw and heard on the main stages. It's when you're talking with your colleagues at these mingling, kind of networking sessions, it's a chance for you to say, yeah, what did you think about this session? What did you think about this with everyone that's around you? So it's those that where you really get to rehash what you just saw and learned on stage. And it just, like I said, I think those networking sessions just let you absorb everything in a much better, it just, yeah, it's just a great way to drive those points home that you just saw. And
Definitely.
then another thing that I love about Shift is that it's not built around an expo like most industry events are. And
Hmm.
that's not a slight at those kind of events. Expos certainly have their purpose, and there's a reason why they're still so popular. I just mean that I love alternatively that Shift is purely content driven. It's all about the thought leadership process and change management that distributors are trying to learn about and enact on a daily basis. And there's such an appetite for that right now. Shift does have an exhibitors row, which is where you'll find our sponsors and our other solution providers that we, like I said, we really appreciate and that we want you to stop by. But as editors, Shift is great because it puts content and thought leadership literally center stage rather than just as a value add. It is the primary value at this event. All right, well, I think we painted a pretty good picture of what Shift 2024 has in store without giving too much of it away. No matter what your distribution demographic, as far as your revenue size or your product vertical, I think, like Vesna mentioned a couple times, Shift really does have something for everyone. And as I mentioned at the start, everyone listening to this podcast can use the code MDM Podcast to get 10% off of their Shift registration. Vesna, before we sign off, any other final thoughts or anything else that you think our audience should know about Shift?
Yeah, I think I'd just like to echo what you said about bringing your teams in, having it a little bit of different than most conferences you go to. It just has this intimate feeling of just built up of a lot of engaged distributors really wanting to learn, and not just learn, but engage in discussions, benchmark against each other. I think it's really so valuable for distributors, and I benefit from listening to those conversations. So to bring more to MDM editorial. So I'm excited for you guys to all to be there. And, I would love to meet you all if you see us around. So don't be shy.
And just echoing your point about it being an intimate event, and it is, we're growing Shift each year, but at the same time, it's not a huge, industry association event where you're kind of fighting crowds to get to different sessions. It is a somewhat smaller, more intimate setting that I think makes it easier for people to really network with people they want to network with instead of trying to find where this person is in this venue. So
Right. Like
I
there's
like
still the
that
main
aspect about it.
there's like still the main stage, or
Yeah.
it's not just a little small little room, but you start recognizing people, by the second day.
Yeah.
You can find people that and there's always somewhere to sit with someone who you haven't met before, so it's really the best of both worlds.
All right. Well, this has been the MDM podcast, and we hope to see you in Denver. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the MDM podcast. Like what you just heard? Subscribe to hear more or leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts, or see them all at mdm.com/podcasts.